Morning, everybody. Good morning, Matthew.
Hey, good morning, Teepa.
Well, look at me.
And look at you on
I
the road
am
again.
in a hotel room,
You are in a
and,
hotel room,
and
which
so
I
are
hate
other
to
members
say.
of our team.
Yes,
I will emphasize, I am
yes,
not the only
we're
member
not.
of a team
Yes.
in a hotel room. You are home, but that's because you're working with Rebecca to lead a coach course
Yep.
starting today.
Yeah, we got our coach course starting today, a virtual
Yeah,
coach. And
yeah,
it's our
yeah.
last virtual coach too,
That's
because
the
we
last one of the
shifted you.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So that's good news, bad news. The good news is, yay, we have a lot of coaches that are starting to participate. Oh, the bad news is it's the end of the year and we don't have any more scheduled, which means we have no more people who are going to be prepared out there to help people use their skills once they get them.
Now, Teepa, so real quick, no virtuals, but we do have an in-person coach
Oh,
that is happening. So we do have one left, one coach left, but the virtual component, the what is it?
oh,
The ease
oh,
of
and
or the
actually, for those who have capacity, coming to visit with us in early December is a great opportunity to build your skills in person. So if you have the capacity, ask your employer, ask those that you work with, look and see if there's any way you can do it. Actually, North Carolina in December is actually quite nice. It's pleasant, unlike what I would view like Michigan or where, oh, I don't mean to diss Michigan, but it's going to be pretty chilly there in December. And down in North Carolina, we tend to have the just right combination. So anyway, but we are doing a live coach. That one's an in-person. And what's great about in-person coaching is you get a chance to see and feel what it's like to actually be next to the person you're going to coach. And coaching is a very important skill when it comes to changing practice. But today I am actually live in Manitoba, and I'm actually live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Yesterday I got here early enough because I left really early on Monday morning, which is why we had a recording. But we also had a recording because we had pre-done a session. So with two sisters, which was really cool.
yeah, and how awesome it was to have Melinda and Michelle with us. And huge thank you to everybody who commented, who shared their thoughts, and the folks who said, I'm going to go buy one of those today because I know somebody who could really use that. So thank you for
Got a
everybody.
great holiday present. If you're really looking for what could I do for a carer, and that person is Christian based, wow, it's a great opportunity to give them some support in a meaningful way that will last them through a year and actually many years perhaps. So, but today I'm in Manitoba. I'm up in Winnipeg, and Alejandro is with me because we're doing a program for QHS, which is Quality Health Service. And this is a group that has brought me up many times before. And we're going to be working with frontline carers on building their skills. So, in our own way, we're doing an awareness and training that's meant to prepare them for coaches to follow up with. But at least we're doing the introduction and getting people excited and interested in changing how we practice what we do. And I would also say that yesterday I got this really remarkable opportunity to work with the University of Manitoba's occupational therapy program, where we had 44 students and three faculty members sitting in and learning for 2 hours what to do when someone's living with dementia and going over some PAC skills. And it was fun and it was exciting. And we had some folks that were familiar with the work and some folks who write, wow, because they don't do their neurology session to the next semester. But for them, it was like a lot of fun to be present. But today we wanted to revisit sort of what we were doing Sunday, not in the morning. We did Sunday morning. You guys were maybe there for Sunday morning where Amanda, the boys, and I were running and walking and running and walking and jogging and running and getting carried. Well, one of us got carried, not me for a little bit.
Yeah.
But in the evening, the early evening, when we were at Tim Fest and we were celebrating Tim, which is Kathy and Sarah's husband and dad, who lived with FTD and died from the complications of FTD, frontal temporal dementia. And so I wanted to take a few sessions this week, a few, and talk a little bit more in depth about FTD, one of the least well-known dementias. And it's least well-known because people think dementia equals Alzheimer's in general, but the other problem they have is they think it's for old people. And FTD is the most common type of dementia you will get if you have young onset before the age of 65, 70. And FTD, frontal temporal dementia, also doesn't look like a typical dementia because it's not attacking the hippocampal area in such a profound way that that we recognize it as memory problems because it doesn't look or feel like memory problems. It looks like one of 5, 6 packages, and it's not one form. What it does mean, however, and this is what's really important, is that it is about tau pathologies, TAU, tau, a certain type of protein. And when these proteins malform, they twist and torque and they lose the ties of the railroad ties that make the arms and the branches of your nerves effectively reaching out and sending messages along them to the next nerve. And so what it does is it causes failure. Now we hear about tau pathologies in Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
but we hear about it as a secondary kind of phenomena with the beta amyloid, weird protein, being the predominant. For tau pathologies, it's primarily what we see. And we see these changes taking place in the prefrontal cortex and or the temporal lobes and or the structures underneath those that allow them to control movement and sensation and visual regard. Okay. So what I'm going to do today is just lay out the variations. Now, here's the interesting thing. FTD of all the dementias, FTD has the highest profile for not being genetically inherited.
Mm.
So what does that mean, Matthew, if it's not genetically inherited?
Yeah, so it doesn't have the characteristics that would be a part of a gene to where, say, you could go get tested like with an Alzheimer's, there's the AP, what AP40,
APOE4
AP,
or
oh,
3 or
AP,
2.
yeah,
It's the alleles. Mhm.
right. Yeah, so it
Or
doesn't
whether you
have
have the
that.
presenile gene.
Mm,
Yeah, so in other words, it's not genetically predetermined. You must have some capacity for it, or all of us would be getting it, but it isn't predetermined. So it means lifestyle and exposure to things in the world, something about how you lived in the world. And it doesn't mean you did anything wrong, it's just exposure and then transmission.
mm,
It appears that tau pathology is triggered and it's called spontaneous mutation. All of a sudden your tau starts being abnormal and it goes pathological on you. And we believe there's got to be some kind of component of crossing the blood-brain barrier, but what's causing it? Well, they're doing research, but really don't know.
mm,
The other bad news about FTD is it takes longer to be identified, recognized, and then appropriately helped or managed or noted. So on the website, in the a website that if you're greatly interested, it's AFTD, the Association for Frontal Temporal Disease or Dysfunction. They actually recently were trying to decide what were they going to call it because they wanted to make sure, so they've called it the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration because that's what's true about all the conditions that are within this range. So if you're interested in reading some specific stuff with some detail, that would be a place to go and take a look. But if you're not much of a reader, it may not be. a place that you find that much comfort, or if you don't like big words, because it is designed for everybody, but there is a fair amount of lingo that gets used. And that's just the nature of how people are trying to communicate and where it's coming from. So I'm going to try to keep it relatively simple, but FTD divides into where the primary first symptoms show up and what happens after that. And so frontotemporal, if it starts in the front of the brain, then what we'll classically see is behavioral variance. In other words, your behavior changes. And we talk about 6 kinds of things that the front of your brain tends to do for you. So Matthew, since I know, you're going to be actively in that class, do you want to just real quickly like take us through what those 6 things are very quickly?
Yeah, so first one is impulse control, so holding back on those impulses.
Okay.
Second
Yep.
one is being able to take in data from all the other parts of the brain, bring it up forth, and come to a reasonable, rational, logical conclusion.
So thinking before you do something about what the consequences might be.
Got it. Yeah. And then the next one is making choices. So my ability
Oh
to
yeah,
make
being able
choices
to make
based on
decisions consistent with values.
that. Next one is to be able to initiate, sequence, terminate, and move on in tasks. The
Yeah.
next one is
So
be
being
able,
able to actually get going on something, do it accurately, finish it, and then move on to something else. Yeah. So that one, and then,
and then accurate self-awareness. So my
oh
ability to
yeah,
see myself and see what I'm about to do and accurately know I can do this, I got it, or ooh, I need some help.
yeah. So whether or not you can perceive self as self is, not maybe as self was, but am I am I as skilled as I think I am, or do I recognize that may not be working for me? And then the last one.
And then the last one is being able to know my perspective and how I see things, and then also recognize someone else's so that we can come together and do something together.
So
So,
it seems like I might be disrespectful of other people's perspective or think it doesn't count or not understand why they don't think it's a good idea. So yeah, so what you'll notice, what people talk about with frontal temporal is change in personality. I'm not like I was, change in behaviors. And we're going to talk more about those when I dig into that particular element. So the second area we might see changes is in the temporal lobe, and particularly the left temporal lobe more than the right, although both can be impacted.
mhm.
And so that's called primary progressive aphasia. And our temporal lobes are the ones that process auditory data, in particularly language on the left, but rhythm on the right. So there are actually identified 4 people who are doing research. And that's where, again, I will say professionally, it may really super matter for living life. I'm not as convinced that I think once you know you have primary progressive aphasia, then you need to automatically use your prefrontal cortex to start to get yourself in gear for alternatives. But for them, what we have 3 variations of a primary progressive aphasia. And we'll talk more about those when I dive into that. But in general, what we're talking about vocabulary, comprehension, speech production, but it will also be sequencing of words because it has a connection to the prefrontal cortex. It will have a ability to get from sound to sound. So I don't know how to get like I want to say a word and I can't find the next I can't get my mouth to make the next sound. And it's not weakness at that point. There's nothing wrong with my weakness. It's loss of skill related to that. And there are times where I can talk a lot, but what I'm saying just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. There are words of sense in there, but my brain gets carried away and puts a lot out. And then I just go silent kinds of things. So, but it's primarily where communication is problematic, and it may be equal with inability to comprehend and inability to produce, but it may be very different. And then there's a third group and fourth group and fifth group. So when we talk about frontal temporal dementia, people tend to think about, okay, so it'd be front of the brain or the temporal lobes. But the tricky part is there's up underneath there, there's the possibility of FTD plus ALS,
Mm,
which is you have FTD, you have Lou Gehrig's disease, though, in combination. It could be you have corticobasal degeneration. Or it could be the third possibility is that you end up with something that's a little bit different than that. And it is supranuclear palsy, progressive supranuclear palsy. So they're all related to the transition from I want to do something to doing something
mm,
and the command center for how that happens. And each one of them has some unique symptoms that happen early. But if it's taking us a long time to get a diagnosis, those symptoms may be subsumed under new symptoms by the time. And so you have to think back to how did this all start? So, Matthew, that's what we're going to be talking about in other sessions this week. Um, what we know is that somewhere between 5 to 10% of the population of people younger than 65 will have a dementia. And what I'm ultimately saying is what?
yeah. So really being aware that, oh my gosh, there's a lot more folks who could be living with this already that we have no idea at this point. And
And
the
if
curiosity.
behavioral changes first,
Oh,
midlife crisis. They're just really being disrespectful. They're starting to drink a lot. So we're going to talk more about it. If language is the problem, we think maybe they've had a stroke. Maybe there's something going on here. Maybe they're just not trying. Maybe. And if instead what might be going on is some movement stuff, we think, whoa, okay, Parkinson's, ooh, ALS. But what we're missing is it's not just that. And so um, this is one of those tricky ones when people look back, they'll go, oh, you know what? Then this has been going on for a while. I thought they were just not caring. I thought. So in hindsight, people will tend to recognize it. It's not uncommon with young onset for people to think, oh, it's Alzheimer's,
mm,
um, but it's not. So, although you can have more than one dementia, we mentioned that before.
mhm,
So, for today, I just want to talk about this stuff a little bit because if we don't talk about it, people don't talk about it. And when we don't talk about it, people don't talk about it, we stay where we were, which
mhm,
is, well, like dementia equals Alzheimer's. And it's like, yeah, like no. And we long ago got away from the idea that we would be okay with calling something something that it isn't. And if we know and we recognize what might be going on, being willing to say, boy, there's sure a lot of frontal lobe symptoms present. Wow, we're seeing a whole lot of language change. I know you were thinking maybe Alzheimer's, but I'm really curious about the possibilities of something else
mm,
because it turns out it matters. If we have primarily a tau pathology condition, then some of the things we might try for Alzheimer's are actually not indicated or a tau pathology problem. And some of the things we might try for a tau pathology problem, we're ignoring because we think it's a beta amyloid problem or that it's a memory problem. It's not. And if we try to mix everybody together in a pot without understanding, what we end up with is a lot of dissatisfaction and a lot of risk that people don't live well together
mm,
because we've missed some primary place, people, crops, programming, and other possibilities with our pipes because we were not really being curious. So, Matthew, thoughts or ideas before we sign off here?
staying curious. Sounds
Staying
like a
curious.
good reminder to
Super
stay
important.
curious.
Stay curious. Yeah. And get aware and then
Mhm.
become knowledgeable. And if you need to, then maybe you might want to develop some skill. But if you don't even have awareness, I'm not sure how you move forward. So, till next time, take care with your care, take care of yourself. If you have questions, go to the website that I mentioned and read through. But if you have more questions, consider getting up with us. And if you realize, wow, I think I need some skill development, think about what you could do for that. And helping people move from where we are to where we want to be, that's what we do. Changing brains for changing brains. All right, everybody, take care with your care. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Teepa. Bye, everybody.